Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Hope you're enjoying it. This is chapters 11, 12, and the final chapter, 13. We classify this as an essay or a small book, and it's translated by Lionel Giles. Ready? Chapter 11, The 9 Situations. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war recognizes 9 varieties of ground: dispersive ground, facile ground, contentious ground, open ground, ground of intersecting highways, serious ground, difficult ground, hemmed-in ground, and desperate ground." A lot of ground. Dispersive. Ground whereon a chieftain is fighting in his own territory. One of the beautiful things about Sun Tzu is he defines his terms, doesn't he? Just like Aristotle taught us. He didn't teach Sun Tzu, but Sun Tzu understands the importance of definitions. Facile. This is ground whereon he has penetrated into hostile territory, but to no great distance. So it's called facile ground. Contentious. This is ground the possession of which imports great advantage to either side. Open. This is ground which each side has liberty of movement. Intersecting highways. This is ground which forms the key to 3 contiguous states, so that he who occupies it first has most of the empire at his command. Serious. This is ground whereon an army has penetrated into the heart of a hostile country, leaving a number of fortified cities in his rear. Difficult. This is ground that includes mountain, forests, rugged steeps, marshes, and fens, all country that's really hard to traverse. Hemmed-in ground. This is ground which is reached through narrow gorges, from which we can retire only by tortuous paths, so that a small number of the enemy would suffice to crush a large body of our men. Desperate. This is ground on which we can only be saved from destruction by fighting without delay. Using terrain. On dispersive ground, therefore, fight not. On facile ground, halt not. On contentious ground, attack not. On open ground, do not try to block the enemy's way. On ground of intersecting highways, join hands with your allies. On serious ground, gather and plunder. In desperate ground, fight. And on hemmed-in ground, resort to strategy. Bracket. Don't forget, brackets are who? Giles telling us a little bit. So Giles says this is exactly what Hannibal did when he was hemmed in among the mountains on the road to Castellum and to all appearances trapped by Fabius. According to Polybus and Livy, when night came on, he fastened faggots to the horns of some 2,000 oxen, set them afire, and drove the terrified animals toward the passes held by the enemy. The Romans were so alarmed by moving lights that they withdrew, and Hannibal's army passed safely through the defile. The remarkable thing about this strategy is that one almost identical of it was used by Tintan in China in 279 BC, exactly 62 years before Hannibal used it. And here the word faggots means bundle of sticks. So they actually put sticks on these animals, lit them by fire, and drove them. Those who of old were called skillful leaders, knew how to drive a wedge between the enemy's front and rear to prevent cooperation between his larger and smaller divisions and to hinder the good troops from rescuing the bad, the officers from rallying their men. Tactics of skillful leaders. When the enemy's men were scattered, they prevented them from concentrating. Even when their forces were united, they managed to keep them in disorder. When it was to their advantage, they, skillful leaders, made a forward move, and when otherwise, they stopped still. And when asked how to cope with a great host of the enemy in orderly array and on the point of marching to the attack, I should say, quote, begin by seizing something which your opponent holds dear, and then he will be amenable to your will. Rapidity is the essence of war, the quality of moving with speed. Very important. Rapidity is the essence of war. Take advantage of the enemy's unreadiness and make your way by unexpected routes and attack unguarded spots. The following are principles to be observed by an invading force. The further you penetrate into a country, the greater will be the solidarity of your troops, and thus the defenders will not prevail against you. Make forays into fertile country in order to supply your army with food. Carefully study the well-being of your men and do not overtax them. Concentrate your energy and hoard your strength. Keep your army continually on the move and devise unfathomable plans. Throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. Officers and men alike will put forth their utmost strength. When troops fight hard. Soldiers, when in desperate straits, lose their sense of fear, and if there is no place for refuge, they will stand firm. If they are in the heart of a hostile country, they will show a stubborn front, and if there is no help for it, they will fight hard. Thus, without waiting to be marshaled, the soldiers will be constantly on the qui vive, who lives there. Without waiting to be asked, they will do your will. And without restrictions, they will be faithful. Without giving orders, they can be trusted. Prohibit seeking for omens and do away with superstitious doubts. And then when death comes, no apparently predestined calamity need be feared. If our soldiers are not overburdened with money, it's not because that they have a distaste for riches. If their lives are not unduly long, it's not because they have a decline of longevity. On the day that they are ordered out to battle, your soldiers may weep, and those sitting up bedwing their garments, and those lying down letting the tears run down their cheeks. But let them once be brought to bay, and they will display the courage of any of our heroes. Bedwing, cover or sprinkle with drops of water. Shunjan tactics. The skillful tactician may be likened to the Kuizhang, a snake that is found in the Chang Mountains. The snake strike at its head, and you will be attacked by its tail. If you strike at its tail, you will be attacked by its head. And if you strike in the middle, you will be attacked by the head and the tail. Asked if any army can be made to imitate the Shuzhan, I should answer yes. For the men of Wu and the men of Yu are enemies, and yet they are crossing a river in the same boat and are caught by a storm, and they will come to each other's assistance just as if the left hand helps the right hand. Hence, it is not enough to put one's trust in the tethering of horses, and the burying of chariot wheels in the ground. Bracket. These quaint devices to prevent one's army from running away recalled the Athenian hero Sophocles, who carried an anchor with him at the Battle of Plataea in 429 BC, and he used it to firmly fasten himself to one spot. Or Cortez, who burned his ships behind him after landing in Mexico in 1519. Courage and secrecy. The principle on which to manage an army is to set up one standard of courage which all must reach. How to make the best of both strong and weak is a question involving the proper use of ground. Sun Tzu pays a lot of attention to the ground, doesn't he? Thus, the skillful general conducts his army just as though he were leading a single man, willy-nilly by the hand. It is the business of a general to be quiet and thus ensure secrecy, upright and just, and thus maintain order. He must be able to mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance. Bracket. Henderson, in his Stonewall Jackson book, says that, quote, the infinite pains with which Jackson sought to conceal, even from his most trusted staff officers, his movements, his intentions, and his thoughts, a commander less thorough would have pronounced useless. By altering his arrangements and changing his plans, he, the skillful general, keeps the enemy without definite knowledge of his movements. By shifting his camp and taking circuitous routes, he prevents the enemy from anticipating his purpose. Notice the arrows I use? At the critical moment, the leader of an army should act like one who has climbed up a height and then kicks away the ladder behind him. No retreat. He carries his men deep into hostile territory before he shows his hand. He burns his boats and breaks his cooking pots like a shepherd driving a flock of sheep. He drives his men this way and that way, and none knows whether he's going. To muster his host and bring it into danger, this may be termed the business of the general. The different measures suited to the same varieties of ground, the expediency of aggressive or defensive tactics, and the fundamental laws of human nature are things that must most certainly be studied. When invading hostile territory, the general principle is penetrating deeply brings cohesion. Penetrating only a short way means dispersion. In strange territory. When you leave your own country behind and you take your army across neighboring territory, you find yourself on critical ground. And when there are means of communication on all four sides, the ground is one of intersecting highways. And when you penetrate deeply into a country, it's serious ground. And when you penetrate a little way, it's facile ground. And when you have the enemy's strongholds in your rear and narrow passes in front, it's called hemmed-in ground. And when there is no place of refuge at all, it's called desperate ground. And so therefore, on dispersive ground, I should inspire my men with unity of purpose. On facile ground, I should see that there is a close connection between all parts of my army. On contentious ground, I should hurry up my rear. On open ground, I should keep a vigilant eye on my defenses. And on ground of intersecting highways, I should consolidate my alliances. On serious ground, I should try to ensure a continuous stream of supplies. Brackets. Giles points out in his translation that this refers to forge and plunder, and not, as one might suspect, to unbroken communications. Bracket. So this is not Giles talking. This is someone talking about Giles. On difficult ground, I should keep pushing on along the road. On hemmed-in ground, I should block any way of retreat. On desperate ground, I should proclaim to my soldiers the hopelessness of saving their lives, for it is the soldier's disposition to offer an obstinate resistance when surrounded, to fight hard when he cannot help himself, and to obey promptly when he has fallen into danger. We cannot enter into alliance with neighboring princes until we are acquainted with their designs. We are not fit to lead an army on the march unless we are familiar with the face of the country, its mountains and forests, pitfalls and precipices, its marshes and swamps. We shall be unable to turn natural advantages to account unless we make use of local guides. Summary of terrain. Bracket. This concludes what Sun Tzu has to say about grounds and the variations corresponding to them. Reviewing the passages which bear on this important subject, Giles says, there it is again, Giles says, we cannot fail to be struck by the desultory and unmethodical fashion in which it is treated. His elaboration of this is given here in substance. Bracket. Sun Tzu begins abruptly to consider the variations of terrain in Chapter 8 before touching on terrain at all. But he only mentions the 5 types of terrain, numbers 5, 7, 8, and 9, and subsequent lists, and one that is not included in this. In Chapter 9, he deals with a few varieties of grounds, and then in Chapter 10, he sets forth 6 new types with 6 variations, and none of these is mentioned again. At last, in Chapter 11, we come to the 9 grounds par excellence, immediately followed by the variations, and then considerable repetition. Though it is impossible to account for the present state of Sun Tzu's text, a few suggestive facts might be brought into prominence. Who's saying all this? It's not Sun Tzu. Remember, it's in brackets. Chapter 8, according to the tile, should deal with the 9 variations, whereas 5 only appear. It is an abnormally short chapter. Chapter 11 is called the 9 grounds. Several of these are defined twice, besides which there are 2 distinct lists of corresponding variations. The length of Chapter 11 is disproportionate, being double that of any other, except 9. And I do not propose to draw any inferences from these facts, beyond the general conclusion that Sun Tzu's work cannot have come down to us in the shape in which it left his hands. Got that? Sun Tzu's work cannot have come down to us in the shape in which it left his hands. Chapter 8 is obviously defective and probably out of place, while Chapter 11 seems to contain matter that has either been added by a later hand or ought to appear elsewhere. So these are notes put in here by Giles, even though he talks about Giles in the third person at times. So he's just telling us that there's just not the same kind of order and discipline to these chapters. Principles of importance. To be ignorant of any one of the following principles does not benefit a warlike prince. When a warlike prince attacks a powerful state, his generalship shows itself in preventing the concentration of the enemy's forces. He overawes his opponents and their allies and are prevented from joining against him. Hence, he does not strive to ally himself with all and sundry, nor does he foster the power of other states. He carries out his own secret designs, keeping his antagonists in awe. Thus he is able to capture their cities and overthrow their kingdoms. So bestow rewards without regard to rule and issue orders without regard to previous arrangements, and you will be able to handle the whole army. Confront your soldiers with the deed itself, and never let them know your design. And when the outlook is bright, bring it before their eyes, but tell them nothing when the situation is gloomy. Place your army in deadly peril, and it will survive. Plunge it into desperate straits, and it will come off in safety. Think about that. Place your army in deadly peril, and it will survive. Plunge it into desperate straits, and it will come off in safety. For it is precisely when a force has fallen into harm's way that it is capable of striking a blow for victory. This is one of the most important sentences in this book. I'm going to give it another arrow. Pay attention. Success in warfare is gained by carefully accommodating ourselves to the enemy's purpose. This seems like a contradiction, but it's not. Let me read it one more time. Success in warfare is gained by carefully accommodating ourselves to the enemy's purpose. And Giles gives us brackets. In other words, feign stupidity by appearing to yield and fall in with the enemy's wishes. There's that deception thing again. Accommodate the enemy. By persistently hanging on the enemy's flank, we shall succeed in the long run of killing the commander-in-chief. This is called the ability to accomplish a thing by sheer cunning. On the day that you assume your command, block the frontier passes, void the official passports, and stop the passage of all emissaries. Be stern in the council chamber, so that you may control the situation. And if the enemy leaves a door open, you must rush in. Forestall your opponent by seizing what he holds dear, and suddenly contrive to time his arrival on the ground. Walk in the path defined by rule. Bracket. Some authorities rendered this line as discard hard and fast rules, which is certainly more in keeping with Sun Tzu's philosophy of war, as opposed to walk in the path defined by rule. And accommodate yourself to the enemy until you can fight a decisive battle. At first, then, exhibit the coyness of a maiden until the enemy gives you an opening. Afterwards, emulate the rapidity of a running hare, and it will be too late for the enemy to oppose you. Chapter 12, Attack by Fire. Sun Tzu said, there are 5 ways of attacking with fire. The first is to burn soldiers in their camp. The second is to burn stores, supplies. The third is to burn baggage trains. The fourth is to burn arsenals and magazines. And the fifth is to hurl dropping fire amongst the enemy. In order to carry out an attack with fire, we must have means available. The material for raising fire should always be kept in readiness. There is a proper season for making attacks with fire and special days for starting conflagration, an extensive fire which destroys a great deal of land. The proper season is when the weather is very dry. The special days are those when the moon is in the constellations of the sieve, the wall, the wing, and the crossbar. For these are all days of rising wind. Got it? Bracket. These correspond roughly to Sagittarius, the archer, autumn, Taurus, the bull, spring, Leo, the lion, and summer, Aquarius, the water bearer, winter. So these are all constellations when you should use fire. In attacking with fire, one should be prepared to meet 5 possible developments. So when fire breaks out inside the enemy's camp, respond at once with an attack from without. If there is an outbreak of fire, but the enemy's soldiers remain quiet, bide your time. When the force of the flames has reached its height, follow it up with an attack, if that be practical. If not, stay where you are. If it is possible to make an assault with fire from without, don't wait for it to break out within, but deliver your attack at a favorable moment. And when you start a fire, beat to windward of it. Don't attack from the leeward. Windward is upwind. Leeward is downwind. That's pretty common sense, right? A wind that rises in the daytime lasts a long time, but at night, the breeze soon fails. Use of fire and water. In every army, the 5 developments connected with fire must be known. The movements of the stars calculated, and a watch kept for the proper days. Hence, those who use fire as an aid to the attack show intelligence, and those who use water as an aid to the attack gain an accession of strength. By means of water, an enemy may be intercepted, but not robbed of all his belongings. Unhappy is the fate of one who tries to win his battles and succeed in his attacks without cultivating the spirit of enterprise. For the result is a waste of time and general stagnation. And hence the saying, the enlightened ruler lays his plans well ahead. The good general cultivates his resources. Move not unless you see an advantage. Use not your troops unless there is something to be gained. And fight not unless the position is critical. No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. And no general should fight a battle simply out of pique, pride. If it is to your advantage to make a forward move, make a forward move. And if not, stay where you are. Anger may in time change to gladness. Vexation may be succeeded by content. But a kingdom that has once been destroyed can never again come into being. Nor can the dead ever be brought back to life. Hence, the enlightened ruler is heedful, and the good general is full of caution. This is the way to keep a country at peace and an army intact. Pique, a feeling of irritation and resentment resulting from a slight, especially to one's pride. That's the definition of pique. Chapter 13, the use of spies. Sun Tzu said, raising a host of 100,000 men and marching them great distances entails heavy loss on the people and a drain on the resources of the state. The daily expenditure will amount to 1,000 ounces of silver daily. There will be commotion at home and abroad, and men will drop down exhausted on the highways. As many as 700,000 families will be impeded in their labor. Hostile armies may face each other for years, striving for victory, which is decided maybe in a single day. And this being so, to remain in ignorance of the enemy's condition simply because one grudges the outlay of 100 ounces of silver in honors and emoluments is the height of inhumanity. One who acts thus is not a leader of men, no present help to his sovereign, and is no master of victory. Thus, what enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men is foreknowledge. Now, this foreknowledge cannot be elicited from spirits, cannot be obtained inductively from experience, nor by any deductive calculation. Classes of spies. Knowledge of the enemy's disposition. So he's basically saying you can't get this foreknowledge through elicited by spirits. You can't induce it or deduce it. You have to hire spies. Classes of spies. Knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be obtained from other men. Hence the use of spies, of whom there are 5 classes. Types: local, inward, converted, doomed, and surviving. When these 5 kinds of spy are all at work, none can discover all of the ramifications of your secret spy system. This is called, quote, divine manipulation of the threads. It is the sovereign's most precious faculty. Local spying invaders are employing the services of the inhabitants of the district. Inward spies make use of officials of the enemy. Converted spies getting hold of the enemy's spies and then using them for our own purposes. Double agents. Doomed spies doing certain things openly for the purposes of deception and allowing our own spies to know them and to report them to the enemy. Bracket. One Chinese commentator has what seems the best explanation of a doomed spy. Quote, we ostentatiously do things calculated to deceive our own spies, who must be led to believe that they have been unwittingly disclosed. And then, when these spies are captured in the enemy's lines, they will make an entirely false report, and the enemy will take measures accordingly, only to find out that we do something very different. The spies will thereupon be put to death. Close the brackets. And then there's surviving spies, those who bring back news from the enemy's camp. Hence, it is that with none in the whole army are more intimate relations to be maintained than with spies. None should be more liberally rewarded, and in no other business should greater secrecy be preserved. Spies cannot be usefully employed without certain intuitive sagacity, foresight, discernment, methods of espionage. They cannot be properly managed without benevolence and straightforwardness. Who's they? Spies. Without subtle ingenuity of mind, one cannot make certain of the truth of their reports. So be subtle and use your spies for every kind of business. If a secret piece of news is divulged by a spy before the time is ripe, he must be put to death together with the man to whom the secret was told. This is pretty fierce things, right? Whether the object be to crush an army, to storm a city, to assassinate an individual, it is always necessary to begin by finding out the names of the attendants, the aides-de-camps, the doorkeepers, sentries, and the general in command, and our spies must be commissioned to ascertain these. The enemy's spies who have come to spy on us must be sought out, tempted with bribes, led away, and comfortably housed. Thus, they will become converted spies and available for our service. It is through the information brought by the coveted spy, that we are able to acquire and employ local and inward spies. And it is owing to his information, again, that we can cause the doomed spy to carry false tidings to the enemy. Bracket, because the converted spy knows how the enemy can best be deceived. Lastly, it is by his information that the surviving spy can be used on appointed occasions. The end and aim of spying. The end and aim of spying in all its 5 varieties is knowledge of the enemy. And this knowledge can only be derived in the first instance from a converted spy. Hence, it is essential that the converted spy be treated with the utmost liberality. Of old, the rise of the Yin dynasty was due to Ai Qin, who had served under the Hija, and likewise the rise of the Zhou dynasty was due to Liu Yu, who had served under the Yin. And hence it is only the enlightened ruler and the wise general who will use the highest intelligence of the army for purposes of spying. And therefore, they achieve great results. Spies are the most important element in war, because on them largely depends an army's ability to move. You've been reading with Jimmy. This was the end of The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It concludes all of our 4 readings, 5 parts that we read together. Be sure to visit and read other classics on our website. And remember, if you have questions, concerns, you want to debate something, discuss something, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. I'm on YouTube and I'm on the internet, wherever you're reading me. Thanks for coming. Wasn't this a great book? I cannot tell you how much this book is so much more meaningful when I reread it this time with you. I read this several times in college, several times after college in business, and every time I read it, I walk away with more and more knowledge. I used to use spies when I was a teacher. What do you mean, Jimmy? When I was a teacher, I used to teach underachievers, the Billy Badasses. And one of the things that would always happen in the school where I taught was fights. And the only way I knew who started the fight was through bribery. I would pay people to tell me who started the fight. I had my own spy network. It works even today, which we're going to talk about this in the analysis. But again, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. Go back and reread it on your own or reread it again with me. I really recommend this book if you're going to be doing anything in life or business, and enjoy it. Enjoy The Art of War, because it's about conflict, ladies and gentlemen. And I wish I could say there'll never be conflict, but this conflict's been around a long time. Have a great day.